What's up, guys? All right, so the goal of this video is to finish up some of the logic and actually have a functional game by the end of it. It's going to be sweet. Now, that doesn't mean it's the end of this series, though. Once we finish this video, we're going to dive slightly into unit testing in the next one, so I can show you how to apply unit tests to like mono behaviors and Unity. It's a little more difficult than like iOS or other projects just because of the gaming interface side, UI, or Unity physics. Those are just things that you can't really test. So we're gonna go through like separating your code and how you actually test things. So yeah, why don't we just get started right away and get our game working? So let's go ahead and open the code where we left off. Open our tower defense project right here. And as you know, we kind of left it kind of broken, but we have buttons working and we can build towers. So that's cool. What we'll end up doing right now is get the play button working so we can spawn enemies again and start tying things together. Obviously, like we need to subtract money and all that. So let's get started. Let's go ahead and open up our game manager. So go ahead and go in Assets, Script, double click on Game Manager. Okay. And a few things that we need to add public getters to. The first one is total escaped, round escaped, and total killed. We're going to need access to from our enemy script. So let's go ahead and make some public getters for those. So public int, and then make these capital, total escaped, and then get, and then just return lowercase total escaped. Okay, now let's do round escaped. And the difference between total escaped and round escaped, if you remember, we need to keep track of how many escaped in that wave. And then the total escaped is going to just keep track throughout the entire game, so it knows if you hit game over or not. All right, and then one more, we need total killed. So public int total killed with a capital T, and then get and return total killed with a lowercase t. Okay, now let's go ahead and go to our enemy script and get things working on that end. Okay, so the reason we just made those variables public, we need to, when we cross the finish, like if an enemy escapes, right now we're just unregistering this enemy, but we need to also keep track that an enemy escapes so we know if the wave is over. So what we will need to do is we're going to have to call or add a number to total escaped and round escaped. So let's go ahead and call game manager our singleton. So game manager.instance dot, and now we need round escaped plus or equal to 1. And it's yelling at us because we didn't put a setter, so we're going to have to do that. So let's go ahead and just do game manager dot instance dot total escaped right now. And do the same thing, and it's going to yell at us again because we don't have setters. So the whole purpose of this is to just keep track of enemies when they leave the map. Let's go ahead and add those setters. So total escaped, round escaped, and total killed are also, they're all going to need setters. So we'll do that right now. So total escaped equals value. And then round escaped is set round escaped equals value. And then total killed is total killed equals value. Okay, so all these have setters now. Let's go back to our enemy script. The error went away. And let's see, we also need to, down in our die method that sets our enemy Boolean is dead to true, we need to also add to total killed. So we need to call our game manager dot instance dot total killed, and then plus or equals to 1. So we're adding 1 to total killed. All right, so now that we're this far, we need to call some sort of method that is going to check to see if the wave is complete. We need to know if we need to show a play button, a game over button, or the next wave button, right? So every time an enemy escapes or dies, we need some sort of way to check if the game is over or if the wave is over. So why don't we're going to have to go to Game Manager now, and we have to add some sort of method call that can check. We have to add up, total escaped round escaped plus total killed needs to be complete enemies spawned in this round, right? So let's go ahead and do that. All right, so let's scroll down and find a good spot to put this. I'm going to put it right under subtract money and above show menu. And let's call this method just a public void. It's not returning anything. Is wave over? Okay, and this is going to check to see if the current wave is over. So every time an enemy dies or escapes the map, we need to call this. So we can also, right now, we can update our escape label that we added in the last video. So let's go ahead and just do escape. I can't remember what we called it. Okay, total escaped label. So let's go ahead and say total escape label dot text equals, and then we'll just simply write escaped space quotations and then plus, and just say total escaped. We're calling the getter of our escape that we've been adding to every time an enemy escapes. This goes to the grand total to know if there's a game over called or not. And then go ahead and just say plus quotations /10. So this will look like, the number out of 10 escaped. And that's all we have to do here. So this label will update every time an enemy dies or leaves the map. So that is just UI. That's not any game check, but it is something we need. So now we need to do actual game status check, right? So let's go ahead and say if, and let's see, we need to add together round escaped plus total killed. And round escaped is how many enemies escaped this round. We don't care about the total escaped because that would not be the right value to compare for ending a wave. So let's say round escape plus total killed, end parentheses, is equal to total enemies. So if this equals our value of total enemies that we're allowing to spawn each wave, that means the wave is over. So the next thing, so if we enter this if statement, we need to have some code that checks our game state, what it should be. So I think we should probably make another method to check game state just because it could get really long. So let's go ahead and just space this down and say set current game state. We're going to call this method that doesn't exist, right? So once we're in there, we need to check so let's make a public void set current game state function, okay? And the reason we're breaking this all up is we'll learn in our next video when we do unit testing. It's just a lot easier to have small little chunks of code to write the unit tests for. So we need to set the game state. And remember we made that enumerator that we set the game state to, and it'll either be next, play, game over, or win. So those are the things we need to set it to. All right, so the first thing we should probably check is if total escaped is greater than or equal to 10. And 10 is just our hard-coded limit. If 10 enemies escape, you're going to have a game over. And we could make this a variable. It'd probably be better to make it a variable. You can make it 5 if you want to make the game harder. You can do whatever you want, but we're going to stick to 10 in this game. But like I said, you're more than welcome to make it whatever you want. So if it's greater than or equal to 10, we need to set the current state. So that's our variable. Current state would equal game status dot game over, right? Okay, so if more than 10 enemies have escaped, we have a game over. And now let's make an else if. If wave number is equal to 0, and maybe if total killed plus round escaped also equals 0, that probably means our game status should be set to play. So it's like the initial time someone's playing this. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's put this in parentheses. So wave number, if wave number is equal to 0, and if total killed plus round escaped in parentheses, so it adds them and then compares them, is equal to 0, that means our game state hasn't started yet. So we should set our game state to play. So game status dot play. And that will help us set our button to play. So the next one we want to check is our wave numbers versus our total waves. So if it's greater than or equal to our total waves and more than 10 enemies haven't escaped, that means the player won the game, right? So we need to set the game status to win. So else if wave number is greater than or equal to total waves, and total waves is just a value we're setting in the inspector, which is set to 10 right now. So if that statement is true, like if this one doesn't get triggered before it and this one does, that means game status, current state equals game status dot win. And then what would be the last one left over? Like if none of these got triggered, we could just do an else, and that would mean current state equals game status dot next. So we want to play the next round. So the button we can have the button say next, and it would just proceed to the next round, right? All right, cool. All right, now I think this covers every kind of game state, every scenario we could run into. Now, if we go back up to the is wave over, underneath our set current game state, we should call our show menu. And that will update all of our UI for us and make sure the button says the right thing. And yeah, I think that is all we need to do for that. All right, so now we need to call is wave over every time an enemy dies or escapes the map, right? So let's go over to our enemy script. And on the on trigger, enter 2D on the enemy, where we add the round and total escaped, we need to, at the end of this, call game manager dot instance dot is wave over. So every time an enemy leaves or dies, we have to check the status of the game. And that way, if any of those things happen, it'll show the menu too. So it'll show the next wave button, all that good stuff. Okay, so we also need to call this is wave over when an enemy dies, right? Exactly. So why don't we go ahead and call that down here as well. So game manager dot instance dot is wave over. All right, cool. Now we should also, if an enemy dies, we have to add our reward money, right? So we should also call game manager dot instance dot add money, and we have to pass in, so say reward amount, and now that will add to the user's bank when an enemy dies. Okay, so we're getting there. I think our enemy is done for now. I think we have all the hard work done in there. Let's go back to our game manager. All right, so the only thing we're missing now is we need something to spawn our our enemies. So we need to set up, we don't have our button set up, do we? When we click our button, it doesn't do anything. So let's go ahead and go underneath show menu, and let's make a public void, and let's call it play button pressed, okay? All right, and now that I'm remembering, I want to go ahead and save it. Right when we have this, let's go back to our Unity 3D and go to in our hierarchy, go to canvas, and then click on button, and on click action, hit plus on the right side here in our inspector. We need to drag our game manager into our object there from our hierarchy. So drag our game manager in there on the on click, and then on the no function, pull that down, go to game manager, and then we need to find our play button pressed. So go ahead and click that. Now every time that button, that next wave button is pressed, it's going to call that function we just made. So let's go ahead and go back into our code. And just to prove this, why don't we just do a debug.log and say you pushed play. Save it, and let's run our code. And we'll have our, let's run our code where it doesn't maximize and show our console. And I'm going to press play, and look at that. We have our message, you pushed play. So we know our button is working. So cool beans. All right, let's go back to our code. We got a lot of stuff to add in this button. We have to pretty much know, we have to take the state of the game and either, reset total escaped if the game is over, or add on to our wave increment label. We have all that good stuff. So let us do that. Let's start off with a switch statement. We need to check our current game state. So current state, and then do an opening and closing curly brace. And we really only need two states. We need to know if game status is next, and then if it's game over or play, we're pretty much resetting all the variables to the same values. Next is the only one that is like a special case. So let's make a case called game status dot next. And then inside of this, we want to increment our wave number. Okay, so if we're playing wave 1, we want wave 1 to now be wave 2. And we also need to, so our total enemies, we're going to have like initially set at like 3, right? Right now, I know we have them set at 8, but let's say we want to increment our total enemies by the wave number. So that's kind of cool. We're going to start getting a lot of enemies. So like at first, you just have 3 enemies, then it'll go to 4. But then all of a sudden from 4, it's going to be 6, or, it's going to just have a multiplier effect, and it's just going to make the game crazy. So let's say total enemies plus or equal wave number, and then go ahead and say break, and that'll get rid of that error. So this is going to make our waves increment like crazy, okay? So let's go ahead and set our total enemies actually at the top. Total enemies. Let's set it equal to 3 right now. So we want our first wave to be 3 enemies. All right. And then if we set it here, we don't have to remember to do it in the inspector later. All right, and what else do we need to do? Find here we are, our play button. So now we need our default case for everything else. So go ahead and say default, put your colon, and our default would be total enemies. We need to reset, total enemies needs to reset to 3. So this is pretty much, you know, the game is starting over. We want all these values to be here. So total escaped also needs to, well, it needs to be set to 0. Okay, so now let's go ahead and set our total money. So you always start with $10. And we also, now we have to think about this. We have to destroy all the game objects on the screen. We can't have the map start with towers. We can't have the map have anything, really. We have a lot to do. We have no way of keeping track of our towers, do we? So you know how we put all of our enemies in a list? So we could remove them, and, you know, we could keep track of them a little bit. We're going to have to put all our build towers in a list as well. So maybe we should do that right now. Let's just type a break in here to get rid of our error message. Okay, we'll get to that. So we know we need to make a list like we did with our enemies. Remember here, when we register all of our enemies, Game Manager has that. So when we're registering all our enemies to this public list we created, we have to do something similar. We have to make a list on our tower manager that keeps track of every time a tower is built, we need to add it to the list. So it's going to be very similar code. We're going to use register and unregister and destroy all. But let's finish. We have a little bit of code we can finish in our button here. And one of them would be like setting our total money label. Total money label dot text. We want to set that to our total money dot toString. Let's call our getter with a capital T, total money. And then cast it to a string, because since it's a label. And then let's go ahead and update our escaped. Why can I not remember what we named our total escaped? Where is it? Our total escaped label. Okay. Then we need our total escaped label dot text, and we have to update that to escaped, so space quotation plus total escaped plus /10. Okay, so that will update that label. And I think we're done here. And then outside of the switch statement, basically between any state, so next, play, and game over, we have similar things that are going to be happening. And one of them would be we're always destroying the enemies on the screen. So the dead ones we always have to remove. So go ahead and call destroy enemies outside of the switch statement. Whoop, semicolon. And we also have to say total killed. Needs to be 0 because that's only a variable we care per wave, okay? And then round escaped needs to be, let's call the capital round, okay. Round escaped is also just a variable we're keeping track of per round, so that needs to be set to 0. And we always will be updating the wave number, so we can go ahead and update our wave label. Total wave. Do we not have a wave label? All right, now let's find our wave label. Total escaped. Current wave label. All right, so current wave label dot text equals let's go ahead and say wave space quotation mark plus our wave number plus 1. So you have to remember, so our waves are starting at 0, but for a user to read 0, that wouldn't make sense. So we're always going to add a number to them. So wave 0 is actually wave 1 to the user, and yeah, so on from there. All right, now we need to call our coroutine so enemies can actually spawn again. So let's go ahead and say start coroutine. Start coroutine and pass in our spawn method. Okay, now all we have to do is once that button's pressed, we have to hide that button again, right? So let's call our play button dot game object dot set active to false. All right, that's pretty cool. I think we have a lot of stuff here. Let's go ahead and just try to run it to see if pressing play starts a spawn. Look at that. It is working. We have to, I don't know why these guys are showing up. Oh, I do know why. We want Scully to show up. All right, so let's go ahead and here, I want to just see what this is set to. Enemies per spawn. Total waves is 10. Okay, where are we spawning these guys? Spawn. Okay, so we want this to be 0, so Scully is showing up. Let's go ahead and run this one more time. Press play, and there's Scully, the weakest of all 3 of them. Okay, so I'm going to leave this video here. I know I thought we'd get a little further, but I promise on our next video, cool stuff's going to happen. And our game is almost there, guys. It's gonna be cool. Let's kill some people quick. Ooh. Sweet. All right, guys. I'll see you next video.